Paying for training for our teams is an investment, but how do we make sure that we get a return on that investment and don't lose it because that person quickly leaves our employment? One of the things we can use is training fees agreements, and that is exactly what I'm going to talk through in this video today. Quick introduction to me, I'm Jenefer, I'm the founder of Silk Helix, and I do videos every week on all things HR, people leadership, hints, tips, employment law. So hit that subscribe and the notification bell if you don't want to miss a single video. But in this one, we're talking through training fees agreements. So what exactly is a training fee agreement? Well, it's a document that we're going to issue to somebody prior to them starting training. It's going to contain specific details of the course, the name of the course, the costs involved, and they can only be actual costs incurred by the business. They can't include things like wages for time spent on training, but can include the costs paid out for the training or any resources. So let's say you've had to buy books or resources for them to practice on, then you can cover those costs as well. You would detail in there usually a sliding scale of deductions. So if they leave, say, during the course or within 6 months of completion, we might deduct 100% of the costs. If they leave within a year, that might go down to 50% of the costs, 18 months, 25%, and 2 years, nothing. And the reason being is that you're getting the benefits during that period. So the implications to you, the losses to you are less the longer they stay with you after completing the training. And that's why we would expect to see it as a sliding scale. We also need to specifically state in that agreement that we will deduct those costs from their final salary if they are to leave employment for whatever reason during that period. That agreement must be freely entered into. It must be signed by the individual involved and prior to the training. It's not going to be a lawful deduction from wages if you've tried to get a retrospective agreement. So this needs to be in place before they even start doing training. You can make signing a training fees agreement a condition of doing training, but it has to be freely entered into. So that means that the individual can say, actually, I don't want this training because I don't want to sign up to this agreement. Really think about that before you start issuing agreements, because if the individual can say, no, I don't want this, then you've got to consider how important this is to your business, whether it's something that you are going to allow them to say, actually, no, I'm not going to sign this, and therefore you're not going to give them the training, whether there's another way to get those skills into the business. If this training is absolutely essential to your business and they must go on it, or is compulsory training, then it's unlikely that a training fees agreement is going to be the right thing to be issuing. So when should we be issuing a training fees agreement? Well, that's going to really be only those times where the training is going to be significant enough to enhance an individual's CV. So usually training that they're going to get a qualification at the end of it, something that's going to make them more marketable as an individual to future employers, something that is going to give them some kind of quality mark that says that they can work in line with something or deliver a particular service, and therefore they could take that service to another employer. These are sorts of things you would use a training agreement for because it is benefiting them. So any costs that you're recouping you're doing so because they are able to take that training elsewhere and presumably earn more as a result of it and have better choices in terms of employment. So of course, by providing that training, you could be enabling them to go and find other employment, which is not what you want to be doing because you want to get a return on the investment of training. Now that said, training is also a very good way of keeping people. So if people feel valued, they feel that they're being invested in, they feel that they're growing, they're getting something new from this role, they're actually more likely to stay with you. So what we do find is that rarely are we really recouping the costs of those trainings, but they do act as a deterrent. And I have been in situations where clients of mine, employers, have saved themselves £1,000 plus because they've been able to recoup the cost of training because somebody has left soon after completing training. And I do believe they act as a deterrent. So whilst we might not be using them very often, they are a deterrent because somebody's going to be thinking very carefully. If you're talking thousands of pounds in terms of costs of training, to an individual that's a lot of money for them to be trying to cover those costs simply to be able to go and find another role. So they're more likely to stay with you. So whilst there's a lot of things in HR that I say, oh, actually, we don't end up relying on these very often and therefore they're not necessarily worth putting in place, I think these really are. I think that they do benefit the employers. I think they are a deterrent to people leaving. And when people do leave, they are a way of recouping those costs, which can be significant and can then help you, of course, provide that training to other people within the business. And as I've said previously, training fees agreements should only be used for training that somebody can freely choose to do. If you've got compulsory training, say health and safety training that you have to provide as an employer, you cannot rely on training fees agreements for those. You need to be covering the cost of those as an employer. When you have got a training fee agreement in place and you've got all of the 4 elements that I mentioned earlier, somebody has signed that prior to doing the training, then if they do leave you, you can deduct the costs from their final salary. I would strongly recommend that you write to them, so when they give you their notice, that you write to them confirming acceptance of that notice as you would do normally, but that you also put in there just a reminder there's this training fee agreement in place, and as a result we will be deducting from your salary, detailing the amount you're deducting to cover the costs as signed and agreed in the agreement, and provide them with a copy of that agreement. It just helps to ensure that they know exactly what's coming with their final salary and avoid any arguments or disputes later on. So that's how you use training fees agreements. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer you. And keep up to date with all my hints and tips. Hit subscribe and that notification bell to make sure you don't miss a single video.